The stars in the Nexus sector burned cold and distant as Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the command bridge of his flagship. The massive alien vessel, named Eternal Dominion, stretched over 3 kilometers in length. Its dark metal hull bristled with weapon arrays that could destroy entire cities. Around it, 46 other warships hung in perfect formation like deadly jewels scattered across the void. Hyunwoo was a Valerian, tall and elegant with pale blue skin that seemed to glow under the bridge lights. His species had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. They were proud, intelligent, and utterly convinced of their superiority over the younger races that dared to venture into space. The humans were the newest of these upstart species, having only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. "Admiral," called Captain Ji-ho from his position at the tactical display. Ji-ho was shorter than his commander, but equally proud. His green eyes studied the sensor readings with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "We have confirmation. 1 human vessel, exactly where our intelligence said it would be. The alien fleet had been hunting this ship for 3 days. It was supposedly carrying important human diplomats to a peace conference with the Corvan hegemony. Hyunwoo had other plans. Capturing these diplomats would send a clear message to the humans about their place in the galactic order. "Show me," Hyunwoo commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying the human ship against the star field. It looked pathetically small compared to the alien warships surrounding it. The vessel appeared to be a standard frigate design, maybe 400 meters long. Its hull was dark gray with simple, functional lines. There were no decorative elements, no artistic flourishes that marked the ships of more civilized species. "Scan. Results. Commander Taemin?" Hyunwoo asked. Taemin was from the Corvan species, built like a living mountain with thick armor plating instead of normal skin. His people were warriors by nature, and he served aboard the Valerian flagship as part of a military exchange program. His massive fingers danced over the scanner controls with surprising grace. "The vessel registers as HSV Indomitable," Taemin rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Standard human frigate configuration. Crew complement approximately 200. Armament appears minimal, perhaps a dozen missile tubes and some basic energy weapons. Their shields are only at 30% power." Hyunwoo smiled. It was exactly as he had expected. The humans talked big about their independence and their rights, but when faced with real military power, they were revealed as the primitive species they truly were. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. The view screen shifted to show the bridge of the human ship. It was cramped and utilitarian, nothing like the spacious command centers of proper warships. A human female sat in the captain's chair, wearing a simple blue uniform with minimal decoration. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her dark eyes held a calmness that Hyunwoo found irritating. "I am Captain So Young of the Terran vessel Indomitable," she said without waiting for the aliens to speak first. Her voice was steady and showed no fear, despite being outnumbered 47-1. "State your business in human space." Hyunwoo laughed, and the sound echoed across both bridges. "Human space? Child, you are in the Nexus sector, which has been under Valerian protection for longer than your species has had written language. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded." Captain So Young did not even blink. This sector was formally claimed by the Terran Federation 6 months ago, and that claim was filed with the Galactic Council. You have no authority here. Behind Captain So Young, other human officers worked quietly at their stations. One young man with nervous eyes kept glancing at a particular control panel. Another officer, a woman with short brown hair, monitored what appeared to be engineering systems. They all seemed strangely calm for people facing impossible odds. "The Galactic Council recognizes only civilized species," Commander Taemin growled, pushing forward on the communication channel. "Humans have been in space for barely 50 years. You have not earned the right to claim anything." "Earned the right?" Captain So Young's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Interesting perspective. Tell me, Commander, how long did it take your people to earn their first system?" "The Corvan hegemony conquered 12 worlds in our first decade of spaceflight," Taemin boasted. "We proved our strength through action, not through filing papers with bureaucrats." Captain So Young nodded slowly. "Strength through action. I see. She looked directly at Admiral Hyunwoo. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw from human-claimed space before we consider you hostile." The silence that followed was broken only by laughter from the alien bridges. Even the normally serious Corvan warriors chuckled at what they saw as human arrogance. 47 warships against one small frigate, and the humans were making threats. "This is adorable," Captain Ji-ho said to his admiral. "Should we disable their weapons first, or just their engines?" "Engines," Hyunwoo decided. "I want them, helpless but able to watch as we take their diplomats. It will be a lesson they remember." He turned back to the communication channel. "Captain So-young, you have impressed me with your courage, if not your wisdom. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated well. Resist, and we will be forced to demonstrate why humanity should learn its place in the galaxy." Captain So-young consulted a small display beside her chair. 20 seconds remaining," she said calmly. "Admiral," the Valerian sensor officer called. "Out. I am detecting some unusual readings from the human ship. Their power levels are fluctuating in ways I have never seen before." Hyunwoo frowned but dismissed the concern. Human technology was primitive. Whatever they were doing, it could not possibly threaten a fleet of this size and power. 15 seconds, Captain So-young announced. On the human bridge, the nervous young officer at the special control panel looked up at his captain. "Captain," he said quietly, "shall I activate the Titan protocol?" The question was spoken softly, but somehow it carried clearly across the communication channel. Admiral Hyunwoo felt a strange chill run down his spine. There was something in the way the human officer had said those words, something that suggested they were more than just the desperate bluff of an outnumbered crew. Captain So-young looked at the young officer and smiled. It was not the smile of someone facing defeat. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that would change everything. "Yes, Min-ho," she said. "Activate the Titan protocol." Her finger moved toward a single button on her command chair. Around, the alien fleet, weapon systems charged to full power, preparing to disable the small human ship. 47 warships against one. The odds could not be more clear. Captain So-young pressed the button. The moment Captain So-young pressed the button, everything changed. Admiral Hyunwoo watched in disbelief as the human ship began to transform before his eyes. What had appeared to be a simple frigate started to unfold like a mechanical flower, blooming in space. Massive sections of hull that had seemed like standard armor plating suddenly slid apart with perfect precision. "What in the void is happening?" Captain Ji-ho demanded, his green eyes wide with shock. The small human vessel was growing. Hidden compartments opened along its length, revealing weapon systems that had been concealed within what appeared to be normal hull sections. The ship stretched longer and longer as more sections deployed, each one bristling with armaments that dwarfed anything in the alien fleet. Commander Tae-min's thick fingers flew over his scanner controls. But the readings made no sense. "Admiral, the ship is still expanding. Current length, 8 kilometers. 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers, and still growing." Engineer Da-un, a female Corvan working at the sensor station, stared at her displays in horror. Her armored skin had turned pale gray, a sign of extreme fear in her species. "Sir, my threat assessment systems are going crazy. They keep recalculating the danger level, but the numbers just keep climbing higher and higher." On the main view screen, the transformation continued. What had once been a harmless-looking frigate was now revealed as something far more terrifying. Weapon ports opened along the massive hull like eyes awakening from sleep. Energy conduits glowed with power that made the alien fleet's combined firepower look like candles compared to a star. 15 kilometers long, Tae-min reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral, this ship is larger than our entire flagship." But it was not just the size that terrified the alien crews. It was the design. Every line of the vessel spoke of one purpose: destruction. There were no decorative elements, no wasted space, no consideration for anything except maximum military efficiency. This was not a ship that carried weapons. This was a weapon that happened to carry a crew. The communication channel crackled to life, but now it was a different human speaking. A young male officer with serious eyes looked out at the alien fleet. "This is Lieutenant Wu Jin of the Terran Defense Fleet," he announced. "You are no longer facing the HSV Indomitable. You are now in the presence of the HSS Kronos, Titan class, battleship of humanity's deepest space forces." Admiral Hyun Woo felt his proud confidence crumbling like sand. 47 ships had seemed like overwhelming force against a single frigate. Against this monster of metal and energy, they looked like children with toy weapons. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our intelligence said nothing about ships like this." Captain So Young appeared on the screen again, but now her calm expression made perfect sense. She had not been brave in the face of impossible odds. She had been patient, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. "Admiral Hyun Woo," she said, "you spoke about earning rights through strength. You demanded that humanity prove itself worthy of claiming space. Very well. Are you satisfied with this proof?" The alien fleet hung motionless in space, their weapons still charged, but suddenly seeming pathetically inadequate. The Kronos had finished its transformation and now floated before them like a dark metal mountain bristling with enough firepower to crack planets. "This is not possible," Commander Taemin growled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Humans have only been in space for 50 years. You cannot have built something like this." Lieutenant Wu Jin smiled coldly. "Commander, you assume that the ships you have seen represent the full extent of human technology. That assumption was incorrect." Engineer Da-un looked up from her console, her face twisted with fear. "Admiral, I am reading energy signatures that I do not recognize. Their power output is beyond anything in our databases. If they fired their main weapons, they could destroy our entire fleet with a single volley." The bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell silent. Every alien officer stared at the massive human ship that had appeared from nowhere, disguised as prey, but revealed as the ultimate predator. Captain Ji-ho was the first to speak. "Admiral, perhaps we should consider withdrawing. Our mission was to capture diplomats, not to engage in a battle we cannot win." But Admiral Hyun Woo's pride would not let him retreat so easily. "One ship," he said through gritted teeth. "No matter how large, it is still just one ship against 47. We have fought battles against worse odds, have we?" Commander Taemin asked quietly. He was a warrior by birth and training, but he was also practical. "Admiral, my people have a saying. Only a fool challenges a mountain to fall on him." The human ship Captain So Young consulted with her officers. The transformation had revealed not just weapons, but also the full crew complement of the vessel. What had appeared to be a ship with 200 people was actually carrying over 10,000 highly trained personnel. "Captain," called a female officer with short black hair, "all systems are online. Titan protocol is fully active. We are ready for any action you deem necessary." Captain So Young nodded. "Thank you, Yunji. Maintain readiness, but hold fire unless they make the first move." The science officer, Yunji, looked worried as she studied her instruments. "Captain, I am detecting some unusual readings from our own systems. The quantum field generators are producing effects I have never seen before. The energy patterns are strange." But before Captain So Young could respond, Admiral Hyun Woo made his decision. His pride and anger overwhelmed his common sense. "All ships," he broadcast to his fleet. "Target the human vessel. Concentrate all fire on their main hull. Even a mountain can be broken if you hit it hard enough." The alien fleet opened fire as one. Thousands of energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the Kronos. It was the combined firepower of 6 different species, enough destructive force to level continents. Captain So Young watched the incoming weapons with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the encounter. "Yunji," she said quietly, "prepare the temporal defense grid." Science Officer Yunji's hands moved over her controls, but she hesitated. "Captain, are you certain? We have never tested this system in actual combat. The theoretical models suggest possible side effects that could be—" "Do it," Captain So Young ordered. The young woman's finger hovered over a control marked with warnings in multiple languages. The label read, "Temporal manipulation, authorized personnel only." As the alien weapons raced toward their ship, carrying enough energy to destroy a dozen normal vessels, Captain So Young looked at her crew and spoke words that would change everything. Activate the temporal defense system. Yunji pressed the control. The universe held its breath. Science Officer Yunji pressed the temporal defense control, and reality itself seemed to shiver. For a moment that lasted forever and no time at all, everything in space flickered like a candle flame in the wind. Then, time stopped. The thousands of energy beams and missiles fired by the alien fleet froze in space like deadly sculptures. Some were only meters away from the Kronos hull, so close that the human crew could see individual missile fins and the swirling patterns of plasma energy. But they hung motionless, trapped in a moment that refused to pass. Captain So Young looked around her bridge in amazement. Her crew moved normally, spoke normally, breathed normally. But outside their ship, the universe had become a frozen painting. "Report!" she ordered, her voice steady despite the impossible thing they had just done. Science Officer Yunji stared at her instruments in wonder and terror. "Captain, we have created a temporal field extending approximately 1 light-year in all directions. Within this field, time moves normally for us. Outside the field, time passes at its regular speed. But everything caught between those two states is frozen." Weapons Officer Sungmin moved to one of the viewing ports and pressed, his face against the transparent metal. "Captain, you need to see this. The alien weapons are right there. I could reach out and touch them if the hull was not in the way." Other crew members gathered at viewing stations throughout the ship. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Energy beams hung in space like solid bars of light. Missiles floated, motionless, their engines still burning but producing no movement. Even the stars seemed different, their light frozen in patterns that hurt to look at too long. Communications Officer Wu Jin tried to contact the alien fleet. What came through the speakers was not language, but something that sounded like the groaning of ancient mountains. The alien voices had been stretched and distorted by the time field until they became deep, meaningless sounds. "They are trying to speak," Wu Jin reported. "But their words are taking hours to form. From their perspective, we must be moving impossibly fast." Captain So Young walked to the main view screen, where the alien fleet hung like metal insects trapped in amber. She could see the bridges of several ships and the expressions on the faces of their crews. Admiral Hyun Woo stood frozen with his mouth open in shock. Commander Taemin was caught reaching for his weapon controls. Captain Jiho had his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. "They are aware," she realized. "They can see what is happening, but they cannot move or react. They are experiencing every second of this, but stretched out like a single breath taking hours to complete." Navigator Hye-jin looked up from her station, her face pale with worry. "Captain, I am reading something disturbing. We cannot contact Earth or any other human ships. The temporal field has isolated us completely. We are alone in this frozen moment." The full weight of their situation began to settle on the crew. They had won the battle before it could truly begin, but at what cost? They were trapped in their own victory, cut off from the rest of humanity, and surrounded by enemies who could not move, but could still think and suffer. Medical Officer Bo-ram moved among the crew, checking their vital signs and mental state. "Captain, the stress readings are concerning. Some of the crew are showing signs of temporal displacement syndrome. Being inside a time field like this is affecting their minds." Captain So Young nodded grimly. She had read the theoretical papers about temporal manipulation, but no one had ever tested it on this scale before. The human scientists who designed the system had warned that it might have unexpected effects on both the users and their targets. Engineer Da-un aboard the alien flagship was experiencing something far worse than the human crew. She was conscious and aware, but her body would not obey her commands. Every thought took tremendous effort, like trying to think while drowning in thick liquid. She could see her instruments, could understand that something impossible was happening. But she could not move fast enough to react. From her perspective, the human ships seemed to be moving at incredible speed. She watched as tiny figures moved quickly across the Kronos bridge, but their actions were too fast for her time-stretched mind to follow. It was like watching lightning try to hold a conversation. Admiral Hyun-woo was trapped in his own private hell. His pride had led the fleet into this disaster, and now he could do nothing but think about his failure. Every second felt like an hour, every minute like a day. He was aware of his crew around him, all frozen in the same moment of shock and fear, but he could not help them or even speak to comfort them. Meanwhile, on the Kronos, the human crew began to discover the true horror of their situation. Tactical Officer Minho was the first to notice something that made his blood run cold. "Captain," he called out, his voice tight with worry. "The temporal field is not stable. It is growing. Science." Officer Yunji quickly confirmed his readings. "He is correct. The field is expanding slowly but steadily. At the current rate, it will reach the edge of this star system in approximately 6 hours." "What happens then?" Captain So-Young asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Any ships, stations, or planets caught in the expanding field will be frozen in time just like the alien fleet," Yunji replied. "Captain, there is a civilian space station at the edge of this system. It has over 15,000 people aboard, including families and children." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Their weapon had worked too well. They had not just stopped the alien fleet. They had created a growing bubble of frozen time that threatened to trap innocent people. Communications Officer Wu Jin suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, I am receiving a signal. It is very weak and distorted, but someone is trying to communicate with us from within the time field." "From the alien fleet?" Captain So-Young asked. "Yes, ma'am. It appears to be coming from their flagship. Someone over there has found a way to send a message through the temporal distortion." The message came through slowly. Each word stretched and distorted but understandable. The voice was female, speaking in broken but clear human language. "Human, ship. This is Engineer Da-Un, Corvin Vessel Eternal Dominion. Please respond. We may have solution to temporal field, but need your help. Time is running out for everyone." Captain So-Young stared at the communication panel in amazement. One of their enemies was trying to save them all. Time became the enemy of everyone trapped within the temporal field. For the human crew aboard the Kronos, 3 hours had passed since Engineer Da-Un first made contact. Those 3 hours felt like 3 days. The constant knowledge that they were isolated in a bubble of frozen time pressed down on their minds like a physical weight. Medical Officer Bo-Ram moved through the ship's corridors, checking on crew members who were showing signs of what she called temporal madness. Some stared out viewing ports for hours, fascinated by the frozen alien weapons hanging in space. Others refused to look outside at all, terrified by the sight of a universe that had stopped moving. "Captain," Bo-Ram reported to the bridge, "we are losing people to the psychological pressure. 12 crew members are showing severe anxiety symptoms. 6 more have developed what appears to be temporal vertigo. They cannot tell if they are moving normally or if everything else has slowed down." Captain So-Young listened to the report while studying the sealed orders that had been locked in her personal safe. She had opened them 2 hours ago, and the contents still made her feel sick with dread. The orders were stamped with the highest security markings of the Terran Defense Fleet. They explained the true purpose of the Titan Protocol and the temporal defense system. It was not meant to be a weapon for winning battles. It was meant to be humanity's final answer to extinction. If Earth was ever threatened with total destruction, the Titan-class ships were designed to activate their temporal fields and take their enemies with them into frozen eternity. The field could only be collapsed by destroying the ship that created it. Everyone aboard would die, but they would ensure that humanity's enemies could never harm anyone else. It was a weapon of mutual destruction, and Captain So-Young had activated it in what should have been a simple battle. Science Officer Eunji worked frantically with the data that Engineer Da-Un had transmitted from the alien flagship. The Corvin engineer had somehow managed to send detailed technical information through the temporal distortion, but understanding, it was like trying to solve a puzzle while the pieces kept changing shape. "The theory is sound," Eunji reported, "but incredibly dangerous. She proposes creating a resonance between our temporal field generator and their ship's main power core. If we can synchronize the energy patterns perfectly, we might be able to collapse the field without destroying either ship." Tactical Officer Minho looked up from his calculations. "What are the chances of success?" "Approximately 30%, Yunji replied. "If we fail, the resonance could destabilize both ships. We could all be destroyed instantly, or we could make the temporal field permanent and expanding." Communications Officer Wu Jin continued his slow conversation with Engineer Da-Un. Each exchange took nearly an hour as messages crawled through the time distortion between the ships. She says her people are suffering badly, Wu Jin reported. From their perspective, they have been frozen for what feels like weeks. Some of the alien crew members are losing their minds from the experience. Admiral Hyun Woo himself has been trying to speak for the past hour, but his words are taking so long to form that she cannot understand what he is trying to say. Meanwhile, aboard the alien flagship, engineer Da Yun struggled against the temporal effects that made every thought an enormous effort. Her Corvan physiology was stronger than most species, but even she was reaching her limits. She had managed to contact the human ship by using her engineering knowledge to modify the ship's communication array. The process had taken what felt like days from her perspective, but she knew it was necessary. The expanding temporal field would eventually trap innocent civilians, and she could not let that happen. Dione had worked with temporal mechanics before, during her studies at the Corvan Engineering Academy. She understood the theoretical basis for what the humans had done, and she also understood how it might be undone. But the solution required cooperation between enemies and trust from people who had been trying to kill each other moments before. Admiral Hyun Woo existed in his own prison of frozen time. He was aware of everything happening around him, but he could not move or speak fast enough to influence events. He watched Engineer Da-Yun work at her station, saw her sending messages to the human ship, and slowly began to understand that she was trying to save everyone. His pride had brought them to this disaster. His refusal to retreat when faced with superior firepower had trapped his entire fleet in this temporal hell. Now he could only watch as one of his junior officers worked desperately to find a solution that he himself could not provide. Captain Ji-ho and Commander Tae-min were experiencing similar torture. They were soldiers and officers, trained to act and make decisions, but the temporal field had reduced them to helpless observers. They could think, they could feel fear and regret, but they could do nothing to help their crews or themselves. Back on the Kronos, Navigator Hae-jin made a discovery that filled everyone with new urgency. Captain, the civilian space station at the edge of the system is beginning to show temporal distortion effects. The field will reach them in less than 3 hours. Once it does, 15,000 innocent people will be trapped just like the alien fleet. Captain So-young closed her eyes and made a decision that went against every military protocol she had ever learned. She was going to trust her enemies, with the lives of her crew and the safety of thousands of civilians. Yoon-ji, she ordered, begin implementing Engineer Da-eun's plan. Share our technical specifications with their engineering team. Captain, Weapons Officer Sung-min protested, those specifications are classified at the highest levels. If this plan fails and some of them survive, we will have given away humanity's greatest military secrets. If this plan fails, Captain So-young replied quietly, none of us will survive to care about secrets. And if we do nothing, innocent families will be trapped in frozen time forever. She opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. Engineer Da-eun, this is Captain So-young. We are transmitting our temporal field specifications now. I am trusting you with technology that could destroy my entire species if it falls into the wrong hands. Do not make me regret this decision. The response came back slowly, each word stretched by the temporal distortion. Captain, I understand the trust you show. My people will remember this. We will not fail. As the two ships began sharing their most secret technologies, the temporal field continued to expand toward the civilian station, where thousands of innocent people went about their daily lives, unaware that time itself was racing toward them like a silent, invisible storm. The final hour had arrived. Captain So-young stood on her bridge, watching as her crew worked alongside their former enemies to save everyone trapped in the temporal field. The civilian space station was now only 30 minutes away from being caught in the expanding bubble of frozen time. Science Officer Yoon-ji had dark circles under her eyes from hours of continuous work, but her voice remained steady. Captain, we have synchronized our temporal field generator with the alien ship's power core. Engineer Da-Yun's calculations appear to be correct. If we can create the exact energy resonance she described, we should be able to collapse the field. Safely, Communications Officer Woo Jin looked up from his station. Captain, I am receiving a message from Admiral Hyun Woo. He has been trying to speak for the past 2 hours, and his words are finally coming through. The alien admiral's voice came through the speakers, stretched and distorted but understandable. "Human captain, I was wrong. My pride brought disaster to both our peoples. If we survive this, I will remember your mercy, when you could have let us suffer." Captain So Young felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Even trapped in frozen time, the alien commander was showing honor and wisdom. Perhaps there was hope for peace between their species after all. Medical Officer Bo Ram reported from the medical bay. "Captain, the crew is holding together, but just barely. If we remain in this temporal field much longer, we will start losing people to complete mental breakdown. We need to act now." Navigator Haijin called out from her station. 25 minutes until the field reaches the civilian station. Captain, there are children aboard that station, families who have done nothing wrong." The image of innocent families being trapped in frozen time forever made Captain So Young's decision clear. She would risk everything to save them, even if it meant trusting completely in the words of an enemy engineer. "All stations prepare for temporal field collapse," she ordered. "Yunji, begin the resonance sequence." Aboard the alien flagship, Engineer Da-un worked with desperate efficiency. Her people were depending on her, the human crew was depending on her, and thousands of innocent civilians were depending on her. The mathematical calculations had to be perfect, or everyone would die. She had shared her deepest knowledge of temporal mechanics with the humans, and they had responded by sharing secrets that could revolutionize Corvan technology. The level of trust between former enemies was something she had never seen before in all her years of military service. Admiral Hyun-woo watched his engineer work, finally understanding what true strength looked like. It was not the power to destroy enemies, but the wisdom to save them when destruction served no purpose. The humans could have let the alien fleet suffer in frozen time forever, but instead, they chose to risk their own lives for a chance to save everyone. The resonance sequence began with a low hum that seemed to come from the very fabric of space itself. Both ships' power cores started to pulse in rhythm, their energy patterns synchronized across the barrier of distorted time. "Resonance at 15% and climbing," Science Officer Yoon-ji reported. "So far, the field is stable." Tactical. Officer Minho monitored the weapons systems of both fleets. The alien weapons that had been frozen in space began to flicker slightly, as if reality was trying to remember how to move. 25% resonance, Yoon-ji called out. "I am detecting fluctuations in the temporal matrix. The field is beginning to respond." Weapons Officer Sung Min watched the energy readings with growing concern. "Captain, if this fails, the energy release could destroy both fleets instantly. Are you certain we should continue?" Captain So Young looked at the display showing the civilian station, where families were living normal lives, unaware that frozen time was racing toward them. "Continue the sequence." 50% resonance achieved, Yoon-ji announced. "The temporal field is definitely destabilizing, but in a controlled manner. Engineer Da-un's calculations are holding true." Across the communication channel, Da-un's strained voice came through. "Human ship, resonance pattern is stable on our end. Continue to 75%. Then we must act quickly." The space around both fleets began to shimmer like water disturbed by wind. The frozen weapons started to move again, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as time began to flow normally once more. 75% resonance, Yoon-ji shouted over the growing hum of the machinery. "Captain, we need to complete the collapse sequence now, or the field will become unstable." "Do it," Captain So Young ordered. Both ships released their synchronized energy burst at exactly the same moment. The temporal field collapsed like a soap bubble bursting, and suddenly the universe was moving again. The alien weapons that had been frozen in space continued their original paths, but their energy had been drained by the temporal distortion. They struck the Chronos with no more force than gentle rain, their power exhausted by hours of temporal suspension. Admiral Hyun-woo found himself able to move and speak normally again. The first thing he did was order his fleet to power down all weapons. "Stand down," he commanded. "All ships, lower shields, and deactivate weapon systems." Commander Tae-min looked at his admiral in surprise. "Sir, We still outnumber them 47-1. No, Hyun-woo replied firmly. They had us completely at their mercy, trapped and helpless, and they chose to save us rather than let us suffer. That is not the action of an enemy. That is the action of people who deserve our respect. Captain Jiho nodded in agreement. The humans could have destroyed us all, but instead, they risked everything to free us from the temporal field. Such honor cannot be ignored. Communications Officer Woo Jin received an incoming message from the civilian space station. Captain, the station reports that they detected some temporal distortions, but they are safe and unharmed. The collapse sequence worked perfectly. Captain So Young felt exhaustion and relief wash over her in equal measure. They had done something that should have been impossible. They had taken humanity's most terrible weapon and used it not for destruction, but for salvation. Admiral Hyun-woo opened a communication channel to the Kronos. Captain So Young, I formally withdraw my fleet from this sector and recognize human authority here. Your people have shown wisdom and mercy that my species would do well to learn from. Furthermore, he continued, I will personally recommend to the Galactic Council that humanity be granted full membership and recognition as a major galactic power. Any species that wields such terrible weapons with such restraint has earned the right to stand among the civilized races of the galaxy. Captain So Young smiled, feeling truly relaxed for the first time in hours. Admiral, would you be interested in discussing a joint patrol arrangement for this sector? It seems we both have much to learn from each other. 6 months later, Captain So Young stood on the bridge of a new ship, the HSS Unity. Her crew was mixed, with humans working alongside, Valerians, Corvins, and other species that had once been enemies. Admiral Hyun-woo served as her second-in-command, and Engineer Da-eun headed the Joint Engineering Department. The Kronos had been decommissioned, its terrible temporal weapons sealed away in the deepest vaults of human space. But its legacy lived on in the new era of cooperation it had helped create. Sometimes, Captain So Young reflected, the greatest victory was choosing not to use the ultimate weapon.